I'm Larry Jordan, founder and president of Wi-Tronix.
I'm Ed Harris, director, Duos Technology, Jacksonville, Florida.
I'm John Scheib, former executive vice president and chief strategy officer at Norfolk Southern Corporation, and currently a practicing rail regulatory lawyer.
Having conversations with all opinions is the only way to move our industry forward. This is Disruptive Debates. Today, we'll be talking about the best way to reduce the carbon footprint of our transportation system. How does rail fit into the picture and help society move forward with a carbon-free future? Climate change is real. It's undeniable. The question is, what are we going to do about it? Let's debate. What mode of transportation is doing the best job reducing their carbon footprint? John, I'll have you go first.
Thanks, Larry. Undoubtedly, rail is the most efficient means of transportation in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. According to the EPA's 2019 data, 29% of all greenhouse gas emissions was from the transportation industry. And of that 29%, 82% of it was from light, mid, and heavy-duty trucks. Only 2% was from rail. So unquestionably, rail is the most efficient mode of transportation, and moving more freight onto rail is the way to make the biggest contribution from transportation toward reducing greenhouse gas emissions globally. There are lots of ways to do that, and I hope we'll get a chance to talk about it. But the answer to your question is rail, rail, and rail.
Thanks, John. What would you have to add to that, Ed?
Well, I got to agree with John 100%. I think that is what the world needs to look at, is the ability to move a ton mile as economically and as environmentally friendly as possible. In addition to what John says, rail has changed their practices just based upon the cost of diesel fuel when it comes right down to it in today's technology. The fueling pads, the protective nature of the fueling process itself, the Class 4 federal guidelines for fuel or exhaust prevention. All the railroads have adapted to this. Their operating practices, using idle when they do not need power, shutting engines down, being able to conserve not only fuel, but to protect the environment, was a practice that just started within the last 15 years.
So rail is the greenest way to move freight. So how do we get more of that freight onto the rails and drive us forward? Ed?
The way to get more freight on the rails is service, undoubtedly. The better service offering that railroads can provide, the more opportunities they're going to have to move freight. And it's not just getting the traffic from A to B, Chicago to Los Angeles. It's what we do with the traffic in the first mile and the last mile, whether it's a container going from port to destination or a boxcar full of cardboard going to make cardboard boxes, or lumber coming from Canada to go to the South to build houses. We have to do a much better job, railroads have to do a much better job in that first and last mile, living up to the service commitment and being able to deliver their product on time, every time.
John, what would you like to add to that?
Service is a great point. It starts with all those things that Ed described. Then I think it's layering on things that make it easy for the customer to do business with rail and to move that freight by rail. So things like touch points with customers. Do we make it easy for them to get a price? Do we make it easy for them to deal with rail customer service? Do we make it more like ordering a truck in terms of the way that they interact with the rail companies? There's also the issue of transparency. You know, our customers are being trained by apps like Chick-fil-A, where a traffic manager is learning that they can order instantly, they can track exactly where their sandwich is in the process and know exactly when they're going to get their sandwich. And they're expecting that more and more from the rail sector. And so the more we can give them transparency and make it look like with the information they get from truck, the better we'll do at pulling freight onto the rails, the greener solution.
So the data is clear. Rail is by far the most efficient. How do we get the general public to understand more of this relatively straightforward decision and drive rail into the future? Ed?
Well, based on what John said as far as the transactions that customers have to go through to bill a boxcar worth of goods, and especially if the transaction takes place between two separate railroads, we have to do a better job in a one source billing and billing operation. Throw logistics into that, which a lot of our traffic relies on coming from overseas. You want to be able to catch a bill of lading in Europe for delivery in Port of Norfolk, let's say, for delivery to Chicago across the rail. One transaction, one step, one bill. Make it easy on the customer. Make sure the customer understands what our service offering is, and make sure we deliver to that service offering.
John, would you like a follow-up?
Yeah, it's a great point. One of the things that the North American rail industry really needs to work on, in my opinion, is being able to give the customer a single point of contact for information on rail movements that move across multiple railroads. That's another example where it's highly complicated for a customer, and maybe in their decision-making process, it's just easier to deal with one trucking company. So I would expect over the coming years that the rail industry will focus on reducing the customer friction in that space as well. One other area where we can make a contribution is these companies are also being forced through the ESG process to report on their own greenhouse gas emissions and progress toward objectives. And when they can understand that their supply chain choices can have an impact on their greenhouse or on their ESG reporting, we can help them to make the best decision overall for the climate.
Yeah, definitely. There's some very major corporations around the world that have very aggressive targets, and frankly, they're not going to meet them without a strong partnership with freight rail. Thank you, John and Ed, for a very important discussion around climate change and how the rail industry can help move all of us forward. Join us next time on Disruptive Debates, where we look at federal regulation and the freight rail industry.